In this video, we're going to give you a walkthrough of a new AI-augmented architecture solution from Sparx Services and NovoCircle. The project is called AI Power Tools for EA. It's a desktop extension available for both Claude and GitHub Copilot within VS Code. This is essentially an MCP server that runs locally on your computer, interacting with EA's automation interface and a set of skills to help Claude or GitHub Copilot interact with it. It's available off of the Sparx Services website for immediate download, and there's a 7-day free trial available. A full set of installation instructions come with the download. When you do the installation, you'll enter your license key and activate it. You'll be able to see a number of the different tools that comes with this. There's some settings here around granting permissions. For this demo, I'm setting to always allow my actions and not prompt me. However, if there's certain things you don't want it to do without human interaction, here's where you set those. In this video, we're going to be using the Claude desktop version of AI Power Tools for EA alongside Enterprise Architect version 17.1. We're going to be working with a blank model. So I just created a new QEA model locally on my laptop. You can also connect to a cloud-hosted repository or server connection if you have that available to you. Here's the local EA model. You can see that it's empty right now. And I have Claude desktop connected. I'm actually using Claude code mode here. We'll dig into that in another video. For those of you who are familiar with the Intelligent Automation for Enterprise Architecture white paper that NovoCircle published, you'll recognize that there are 4 key use cases that architects are looking to modernize the way they do their work. Those are architecture modeling, architecture analysis, architecture governance, and stakeholder engagement. We're going to be focusing primarily on the architecture modeling, analysis, and governance activities. But you can learn more about this on the Sparx Services or NovoCircle websites. Before we jump into the demo scenario itself, let's start by talking about what it is we're going to be modeling and what the data looks like. In this case, I've got a simple spreadsheet. This is some org chart data, something that you might expect coming out of a system like Workday or your HR system. It's got a list of employees with their names, job titles, departments, who their manager is, and their worksite locations. We're going to be using this as the core for our modeling exercise today. We'll be uploading that into Claude and using that with AI Power Tools here shortly. So now we're here within Claude Desktop. I opened up a new session and I attached that spreadsheet that we were just looking at that has our org chart data. Like any AI system, I need to give it a good prompt to let the system know what it is I want it to do. In this case, I've given it a 4-step process I'd like it to go through. First, I'd like it to understand the data from the spreadsheet. The second step is to work through what the package structure is going to be. If you've modeled within EA, you know there's lots of ways to organize your packages. And so it's going to give us some suggestions around that. The third step is deciding what stereotypes we're going to use for modeling out the elements. And then the fourth is where we go through and actually build the model. In the model choice here, I chose Sonnet 4.6. If you're doing a lot of deep documentation type tasks or deep analysis across large models, you may want to use the Opus models. However, for the majority of architecture tasks, Sonnet 4.6 is a great model and works well. We're going to go ahead and use the Sonnet model, and we're going to go ahead and kick this off. Claude has come back and given us a summary of what it reads out of the spreadsheet. And I'm glad it did, because it identified some data discrepancies in our source data. We have some discrepancies between what's on this employee directory tab and what's on some of the other tabs. It's saying that the data across your source materials is inconsistent. You need to fix it first. The way we're going to resolve this is to simply give Claude a prompt that said, use only the employee directory worksheet. This is the correct data. Okay, now I've resolved my data discrepancies. I updated my spreadsheet, told it to only look at the employee directory tab. Made things easy here. Here's what it came back with as it reevaluated the source data. It correctly identified we have 25 employees, all reporting up to the CEO. And it shows us what the hierarchy looks like. We have 7 departments, we have 5 work sites, and we have a number of properties per employee. And it's asking, does this look correct and can we move on? Now we're at step 2, where it's asking for guidance on what package structure we want to use within our EA model. It's identifying we have 3 distinct entity types: employees, departments, and locations. That's correct. It gives us some options. The first is a simple flat structure by entity type. The second is organizing by department, so a business-oriented structure. And the third is a hybrid where we have the people organized by departments and the organizational elements modeled separately. I think we're going to use option A. Claude came back with a set of suggestions for what stereotypes that we use within this model. The first option is the Sparx base classes, which are plain UML. The second is using ArchiMate, and it suggests that because it ships with EA and it's available, and some of our objects match well with the ArchiMate stereotypes that are there. The third option it gave us is to author a new custom MDG to go along with this data. I'm going to choose option 1 for now, simply because we're going to be creating the custom MDG later in this demo. As Claude is building this model, I want to take a minute to talk about a really important concept in intelligent automation, and that concept is human in the loop. What Claude is going to create here using AI power tools is not a perfect model. It's going to have issues. This is not meant to be replacement of your architects. This is AI augmented architecture. It's augmenting the job of the human. And it's really critical that humans always be in control, being able to make the design decisions and to express their intent of what's going on within the model. What these tools are doing is automating out a lot of the heavy lifting or busy work it takes to actually implement that intent. So as you think about this, your goal is to get your model 80% done using automated tools, and then use the human to finish it up and get to the final output. And we're going to talk about that when we look at the output here in a second. Claude's finished creating the model. Before we jump in and look at it, let's review what it did so we can understand the logic and the actions that it took on our behalf. It confirmed what it is that we wanted to do. It validated that the starting point was correct. It identified that it was just an empty model with a model package in it, and that it was completely empty. Had it found existing model content, it would have asked us where we wanted to put the new model content that got created. It then went through and created the packages, and then it created the elements. It then added the attributes to those. Once all the attributes were created, it started creating the connectors, and then it created the 2 diagrams that are involved here, and then added the elements to the diagrams. Once it got done creating the diagram, it applied some layouts, and it suggested that hierarchical was best for the org chart and orthogonal for the department membership. Now let's jump over to Enterprise Architect and let's look at these models. Okay, so we're looking at EA. This looks interesting. There's a lot of stuff on these diagrams. Let's start by looking at the elements. There's our department objects. And as we look at those, these are just class type objects. That's fine for now. That's what we told it to do. We have all the employees listed. It created attribute property elements underneath of these things. This is something that I don't really like. It might be more useful for us to have tagged values that we're using to record the data, the attribute data for each of the employees, rather than use properties. So again, it's not perfect. We'll actually address this in the next stage when we look at how we customize this with the MDG. We've got an org hierarchy here. Let's scroll through and take a look at that. Okay. It's an org chart. It's functionally correct. This is something that we talked about, the 80-20 rule. You're trying to get it to 80%. You've got the objects, they're there. You might clean it up and remove the labels on the connectors, or you'll notice here on these properties, it's including the data types. You might not want to show that. These are things that you can adjust in the diagram layouts and make modifications to. But all in all, not a bad start. We entered in a couple of prompts, passed it a spreadsheet. It created a bunch of model elements for us and created some diagrams. So before we move on and talking about MDGs and things like that, I want to next go back into Claude and start looking at some of the analysis use cases. Let's just start asking it some questions. So first question, who's in the technology department? It returned an accurate representation of who's in the technology department. How about this? Show me Chloe's reporting chain. Let's see whether it can traverse connectors. There's Chloe, reports to Toby, reports to Emily, who reports to Bruno. So that's correct. So we've got a lot of folks in Texas. A tornado was reported in Austin. What employees do I have there that I need to check on? It tells me everybody who's tagged as working in Austin. So this is great. This is exactly what I'm looking for. Let's try another one. I'm asking it to generate a PNG image file of the org chart. Here's what it came back with. I could drag and drop this into a PowerPoint presentation if I wanted. Now that we have the model created and it looks good, I asked Claude to create me a simple matrix of employees to locations so we can see who's located where. It did this not within Enterprise Architect, but within Excel. So this is a great example of how it can take model data and kick it out to Excel in a very consumable format that you can send to your stakeholders. And now we're going to move on to the architecture governance use case. When we created this model and brought it in, we chose to just use base UML classes to model the data. We also saw when we did our inspection that there are some things such as the property values and how the attributes were stored that isn't quite how we want it. So we're going to enter in a prompt here that asks it to create a custom MDG for us that puts everything where we need it to be and makes it a proper model with a modeling language structure. So what we've asked it to do is take a look at the data in the model, help me understand what modeling languages are being used, and suggest how we might build a custom MDG that leverages ArchiMate as a base language, but customizes it to our data. If there's something that isn't a good match for ArchiMate, suggest an alternative and explain why. Use tag values for the attributes that came from the spreadsheet instead of property subelements. And then walk me through your thought process so I can approve before you start building. After I've approved, go ahead and create the custom MDG. Be sure to include quick linkers as well as a set of validation rules. Claude's come back with its analysis and its recommendations. So let's take a look at them and review them together. So it shows what's in the current model, and it also did a fit analysis against ArchiMate. The one area it found that there wasn't a very good fit between ArchiMate and our data is in the recursive relationship between employees and their managers. And their recommendation is to keep reports to as a stereotype association in a custom MDG and just acknowledge that this relationship type sits outside of the ArchiMate semantics. And that's appropriate. It correctly addressed our feedback around attributes and tag values. It structured those and gave them data types. And then it went through and defined what the tag values were for each of the element types. So this looks good. It correctly identified where we needed quick linkers. It also built some validation rules. There were 3 items that it came back and needed some approval on. The first one is clarification on org level versus level label tag values. It identified those as being potentially redundant. I feel they have different purposes, so I want to keep both. It also flagged the validation strictness on some of the relationship rules. Specifically, is an employee allowed to be assigned to more than one department, or is an employee allowed to have more than one work location? And what it's identifying is the rules that are being defined may be overly strict and may not meet all the business scenarios. They're great things for architects to think about and review. In this case, I like the strictness. I want to use them for reporting later on. So we're going to keep it as is. And then it also proposed a name for the MDG. It called it TVO. I don't really like that. We're just going to call it Tech Ventures. So we're going to give it clarification on these 3 and then let it go build it. We can now see that the new MDG technology is installed within the EA repository. It's here under Tech Ventures. It's a project level MDG, so it's embedded within the QEA file itself. The next thing we need to do is come back over here to Claude and ask it to update the model contents to use the new MDG technology. While we're waiting on it to load, I came over here and at the end of its install, it actually gave me a link to the source file, the MDG XML, so I could go in and inspect it. Let's take a look at that. This follows the standard MDG format. We see all the stereotypes and the things being created. We see a diagram profile, so it created a custom diagram profile, as well as validation rules. Everything we need is in the MDG technology. We finished applying the new modeling languages to the model content that we created before. I did have to reload the model here, but what we're able to see is if I click on one of the objects, we're able to see it's now using the stereotype from our new custom MDG. And when I look at the tag values, they are properly represented the way that I want them to be. So when we were creating the MDG technology, one of the things it did was create a set of validation rules to go along with the model. Now we're running a validation audit against the model to make sure that the model data matches the rules that we had defined. This is a really powerful tool from a governance perspective because very often this is the first step that happens in an architecture review process. By doing it within AI power tools, you enable the architect doing the modeling to validate their own work at the time that they're creating the model. So Claude came back with its validation audit. It actually found 74 violations the first time, and it identified that it messed up when it was creating some of the connectors. Since the intent was already clear from the previous instructions, it went ahead and just fixed those. It then reran all the tests to validate that all of our conformance rules are met. As we wrap up this video, let's review what we did. We created a model from a spreadsheet. We created a custom modeling language in MDG to represent that model, along with modeling rules. We created PNG files of the diagrams. We created Excel spreadsheets representing the data. We ran a model validation audit. Anytime you get a new update of AI power tools for Sparx EA, you're not only going to get updated MCP capabilities and tools, you're also going to get an expanded set of skills to go along with it. I hope you found this video helpful. In order to use this, you need a valid Sparx Enterprise Architect license, a Claude Pro subscription, which is $20 a month, and you need your AI Power Tools for Sparx EA subscription at $39.99 a month. Go to sparxservices.com to learn more and to start your trial today. If there are other scenarios you'd like us to create demo videos for, we'd love your feedback. Send us an email at help@sparxservices.com. Start your AI augmented architecture journey today.